Well, Marta, welcome back. It's great to have you.
Hello. I feel like a regular now.
You kind of are a regular. So if you take your appearance with Cliff, that's 3 you've been on now, which is getting to be a bit regular. So there you go. You're my regular guest, my regular spiritual guest.
I'm enjoying that very much.
Thank you so much. And I'm enjoying having you here. Now then, last time we spoke a lot about metaphysics. We spoke a lot about spirituality, about reawakening. We spoke about the dangers of ego getting involved with spiritual bypassing and stuff like that. So we spoke a lot of esoterical stuff, and it was fabulous. And the feedback was off the scale, as it was with your and Cliff's appearance. But we did have a few comments asking how we can be more tactical with this without allowing our ego to get in the way. So I thought that's what we'd go through today. Let's be a little bit more tactical. Let's be a little bit more exacting with this. How do you feel about that?
Let's do a little bit more of the how-to, shall we?
Let's do a little bit more of the how-to. So, Marta Wilde, how do we awaken? How do we get more spiritual? How do we go down this path? Let's go.
Let's go there. Well, you know what? I actually was thinking about that before we came on that call together to record this. And we did indeed talk a lot about the woo-woo stuff last time. And these are the conversations that you and I could go on forever. And if someone kind of steps into that part of their life, it's just, you just love talking about this because you're exploring such an alternative view most of the time that when you find a person to talk about that with, it's just like you found your body and you go like, wow, this is amazing. But then for people that kind of want to step into that realm and embrace a different way of living and become a different version of themselves that approaches life from that perspective, it's usually quite daunting at the beginning. And I had a reflective session with my journal after our last recording of the previous episode where, majority of people that have kind of become more spiritual or embrace that way of living, they had that kind of enlightening episode. And it's interesting because I heard one of my mentors talk about that not very long ago, where, for example, someone like Eckhart Tolle, who just suffered so much and he was in so much existential pain and suddenly had an awakening moment and then spent most of his time sitting on benches in parks crying because he couldn't comprehend how beautiful the birds chirping were and just a flower or whatever. And it's a beautifully romantic thing to think about for people that understand even a little bit of spirituality and just that approach to life. But for majority of us, it's just quite unreachable because we've got our jobs to go to or businesses to run or kids to look after, relationships that we live in and creating with our partners together, and all of that day-to-day stuff is quite daunting in respect of, okay, I'd want to sit on a bench and cry because I love that flower in front of me so much, or I love the birds chirping in the trees, but I've got shit to do, right? So I was thinking about that even though my episode wasn't as romantic by me standing up on top of a ladder while redecorating my bedroom and going, holy shit, there's more to this. I was laughing so hard after I actually spoke to you about it. There's just, to start with, when someone becomes even aware of the fact that they would want to look at life in a slightly different way, that's already the first step they've taken. Yeah. I truly believe that, because to even have that awareness that there is a different approach and different view, there's something that's already happened. So when you find yourself feeling like, I'd love to learn more about that, I'd love to become more mindful or spiritual or whatever word works for you, because to certain people, spirituality might be a little bit scary or a little bit too far out there, but just even being more mindful and being more present with the food we eat, with the conversations we're having, the people we talk to, the things that we do, that mindfulness can become a part of anything we do, and our life gets so much richer. And Absolutely. That's what I call it, that sensual living. In a lot of the time, people think of sensuality in terms of sexuality and our romantic connections with our partners, which is very much the truth. However, I take it a step further where I call my life sensual because I prefer a glass that's slightly pink because I love that color and it makes me feel nicer and better when I drink my water. So it's not just the process of drinking water, but it's also the color of the glass, how the glass feels in my hand, and it's a lot more present, a lot more sensual. So I'm using more of my senses.
Absolutely.
So when people become aware of the fact that there is a different way of life and they would want to tap into that, I would encourage everybody to just start using more of their senses, reawakening their senses. And I'll use an example of a client who, he's in his 30s, at the moment, mid-30s, I think, and he had the same autoimmune disease of the gut that Cliff had, ulcerative colitis. And I'm saying had because he doesn't anymore. And, you know, conventional medicine, again, just rewinding a little bit back to what we spoke about in our episode together with Cliff, very often conventional approach will say impossible to cure or solve, medication for life or surgery and stuff like that. So this guy, he lives in New Zealand and suffered a lot. He's a surfer and creates beautiful natural wooden surfboards as well, run workshops. So you can see the guy naturally sensual because he uses his senses. But he was also so depressed and shut down because of the disease that he was struggling with, and he completely forgot about that part of himself. Right. And as he worked with us and as we worked through the physiology of whatever was going on, and Cliff worked with that with him, and I worked more on the mindfulness and mindset and the approach to the disease, the identity with the disease. Yeah. He started going out there and smelling flowers while he was riding his bike. And he said, holy fuck, I forgot that. I don't even know if I've ever done that in my life. And the next time I spoke to him on another call, he said, do you know what? I heard the bees buzzing in the trees, in the flowers. And he's a beekeeper now as well, and messaged me a couple of weeks ago. We're still in contact, even though he's not worked with us for a few years. That's what I mean. Like when you find your buddies to talk about that stuff, you kind of hold on to them.
Crazy, right?
Yeah. He messaged me saying that he collected, I think, oh my God, 50 kilos worth of honey.
Whoa.
And not even emptied all of his beehives because it's the honey harvest season. And I got a jar of his honey when we met up with him and his partner when we were in New Zealand in November. It's just opening up to being more sensual and experiencing world from a much more sensual point of view, which is basically meaning open up your senses. So if you walking down the street, look around you, what can you see, and really take that in. If you walking through the field or running through a field, can you feel the grass? Can you stop and feel the grass? Can you look at the flowers? Can you really hear the birds? Because they will be there in the background, but can you really hear them? And that just enriches our life and gives us such a different perspective. So, you know, it's, to certain people, it's obvious and a thing that they use every day of their lives, but to others, especially when we live in cities and have a 9-to-5 job, it's even on the way back from work. Yeah. Even if you in London, getting on the tube and you're pissed off that it's crowded and it takes you 10 minutes to get down to the platform, pay attention to the people, pay attention to their energy. That's already being more sensual. So it's finding that moment of reflection in even the most uncomfortable situations sometimes.
And that's a great lesson and a valuable starting point, because, you know, most people have difficulty, in my experience, I mean, it might be different for yourself, kind of aligning the more spiritual side they want to explore and their everyday side. So to bring them together initially as quick as possible and say that this is something you embody, it's you, who you really are, and how you really live your life and embody your life and pay attention in life and become aware in life. And you can do it in anything. You can find the joy in anything, as the masters say, right? And it's a great starting point. And I love the
And do you know what? Like, even like finding joy in everything, I feel for majority of us, it will be way too fucking far out there. Because like using the example of coming out of work and getting to the tube, and there being a 10-minute queue to even get down to the platform, and you want to go home, see your kids, have dinner, see your partner, and you just go, right? That frustration. So finding a moment of joy for people in that is just, what are they talking about? They're chatting a load of bollocks, right? They're sitting there running their businesses from home, working online. They have no idea. Well, I've lived in London for years in the past, and that's why I can relate to that and use that as an example. And I was very much that angry motherfucker that just wanted to get home, and I was miserable. However, on Friday, because we're recording it just a few days after Valentine's, obviously it will be released a little bit later, but just to give you guys an idea, Cliff and I flew to London, and we were in London in the Canary Wharf area over Valentine's Day. And for whatever, that's how detached we are for actual that 9 to 5 reality. But for whatever reason, we decided to go to a supermarket at 6 o'clock on a Friday in Canary Wharf.
Find the mindfulness in that, right?
Yeah. Literally, the queues to the tube station were ridiculous. The queues in Waitrose in the supermarket were 50 people deep. I've never seen anything like that. But because we were obviously relatively detached from it, because we weren't necessarily wanting to go get home or whatever, or leaving work, it was easier for us. And because we practice that regularly right now, we just became curious, and we looked at, people watched. We looked at the people going down to the tube. We looked at the people around in the supermarket, what they were buying. Obviously, everyone rushing around with chocolates and flowers for their partners. But even if you are part of that buzz of, you know, trying to get from work to home or whatever, but you know you want to live your life differently, attempt to start with small steps. Can I be a little bit more mindful in the queue? Rather than getting pissed off that it's 50 people deep, can I just have a little look around and see what other people are doing? What's going on? Can I smell the bread from the bakery? Or can I smell the flowers because I'm standing, you know, next to the flower shelf on my way to the checkout? Whatever it might be, just paying attention to those little things just open our mind. It opens our mind to so much more. And from that, even such a simple step of becoming more curious opens us up to a completely different way of life.
It does. It's almost as if we're just opening the door slightly, and that little crack in the door floods the light in, and the light shines, and we want more. We move forward. We develop. So we're talking about this concept of sensual living and awareness and finding the joy, and I think that's a fabulous start. I get that. I embody that. I'm rolling with that. But it's not enough. It's little bits. I'm having little glimpses and I'm getting frustrated. How do we protect ourselves against the frustration because we want to force our way into a spiritual awakening, a new way of being, more detachment, more joy? There's a danger, I think, that we can go too quickly, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, we could definitely. And again, it's a very, very individual awareness of every single one of us, and awareness of us, how we feel with it, because we can very much overwhelm ourselves with it and then completely lose ourselves in it and forget about our day-to-day life. And then the dishes will pile up in the sink, the laundry basket will overflow. And, you know, sometimes it's good to just go, fuck it, I'm going to do it tomorrow, because we're letting go of that control.
Sure.
That makes us feel safer and more comfortable in our experience. But at the same time, it's about paying attention. So that awareness, like obviously in the episode with Cliff together, we talked about the ARA method and how we really truly believe it's just a way of life. So having awareness first of where you are, and then taking responsibility as well. And then that action that follows, the third step. So awareness, responsibility, and then the action as a result of that is the action that feels good to you. And the easiest way to figure out what action feels good for us is just ask yourself a simple question. Does it feel light or does it feel heavy? Because that lightness, that kind of fizzy bubbles feeling within us, whether it's going to be tingles or goosebumps or just nice light feeling within our body, it's telling us it's the right choice. It's the thing that we're meant to do. But heaviness, heavy chest, heavy eyes, anything, just that kind of feeling, we all know what that feels like. It's very often telling us to stop, to reconsider, to not go that way, to not make that step or take that step or make that decision. And, you know, I'm going to cover something else here because I know what some people will think and want to ask, because they will say, well, what if it feels light and I do it and then it turns out shit anyway? That's bullshit then, light or heavy, right? I wasn't meant to do that. Well, you were. Because if it did feel light at the beginning in that first instance and you made that decision, whatever shit came after, you were meant to learn something from it. And it does take practice to live your life that way and to appreciate the fact that even the darkest storms and the darkest moments in our life are there to teach us. We will always see the result in hindsight. But time and time again, the more I listen to my intuition, the more I follow the feeling of lightness, the greater my life gets overall, even though sometimes, and the most dramatic experience with following what felt light was Cliff and I buggering off and moving to California, packing, like selling everything, packing up everything, grabbing our dog, getting on the jet plane, fucking off to a completely different country, continent, different time zone part of the world. And we thought that was going to be home. But within the first 3 to 4 months, maybe even 2 or 3 months, I can't remember, it was fairly quickly into our adventures there, we knew it wasn't home. We knew it's a place in the world we love visiting. And in fact, we're going back next week, but it's not home. So when you sold everything, left all your belongings, gave everything away, and jumped on the plane and went over it thinking that was going to be home, and 2 months in, you know, it's not, it's pretty fucking traumatic.
Yeah.
And it took us a good probably 12 to 18 months to kind of come back to our equilibrium. And we came back to Europe 6 months later. And, you know, it took us a while, but we now know how valuable and powerful that experience was, and it needed to happen. So can we be bold enough with our lives and follow our heart, follow our intuition so relentlessly that we follow the feeling of lightness, we recognize that the heavy feeling is telling us we're not meant to go there, and risk in it. I'm putting it in inverted commas because it's not really risking, but for the sake of the energy and explaining it to everybody listening, can we allow ourselves to take the risk of following our heart and our intuition, knowing that sometimes even though we take that step, it might then turn into a challenge of some sort, but knowing somewhere deep down on some level that that challenge is there to teach us, and eventually we'll see that challenge as a gift.
Yeah, it's a great example. And I remember when that happened for you guys, traumatic, yes, difficult, yes, essential to go through, yes. And the lesson I look at when I look at something like that is that, you know, however perceived bad it could be for someone listening to this and thinking, oh my God, my life would fall apart, what would I do? Actually, when you go through it, it feels heavy, it doesn't feel great. But when you come out the other side and you look back, with the benefit of hindsight and with a bit of awareness, you discover that actually it wasn't catastrophic or as bad as it seemed at the time. And this is why you use risk with inverted commas, because it's more of a calculated gamble, isn't it? That we'll try this, we'll go for it. If it doesn't work, we can always move back. There's always another day. There's always another step. There's always another opportunity. And I think people need to understand this, that sometimes life does take little diverts. It does hit little, bumps in the road. We do face, obstacles.
Or big fuck of barricades.
Yeah. Some days you don't want to get out of bed, so you don't. It's as simple as that. And here's the thing that I always say to people, look, being spiritual doesn't mean you're holier than thou every single day. People still fuck me off. I still have the occasional disagreement with people. But you know what? It's life. And it does give it a sense of just spice, and excitement sometimes. And we don't want it all to be just good, because we lose the relativity of it, don't we?
Yes, exactly.
There's nothing to compare it with. How do we know it's now good?
Exactly. That's I believe we talked about it either on the joint podcast with Cliff or our last one, right? That relativity and the contrast and the necessity of the contrast. And when people embark on the path of mindfulness or spirituality, very often when we have those newbie gains, it's like getting the first couple of pounds of extra muscle when you've worked really hard in the gym for a while, and you're like, oh my God, my body's changing. It's my mind is changing, my life is changing. You see the positive result of you embracing more sensual style of living and more awareness and more mindfulness. But when challenges come, challenges then seem a lot harder and a lot deeper, because we've opened ourselves up to feeling. And like Brené Brown always says, we cannot decide whether we feel good or bad feelings or emotions. We open ourselves up to everything. When you choose to feel, you will feel everything, but we're only opening up ourselves up to feeling everything to feel the totality of life on such a greater scale than ever before. So it's being aware of that seeing the beauty and being more mindful and more open and more spiritual also opens us up to seeing the contrast more strongly. And that's okay, because this too shall pass, and remembering that I've seen people that literally have that tattooed on their forearm to look at and remember when they're going through struggles, this too shall pass. And over the years, reminding myself of that, and reminding myself of the fact that eventually it will make sense in hindsight. Even in the middle of the storm, it might not make any sense. It will eventually. That helped me through the most challenging situations, including the storm after moving to California. And it teaches you to appreciate yourself in a whole different way, because you could be living the rest of your life thinking, what if I did that, or I should have done that? Or you can fucking do what your heart is telling you to do, and then work it out as you go through it, and learn the lessons, and then know that at least you tried and you did it.
Yeah, that's absolutely spot on. And, you know, it's funny that you say that, because in a coaching lesson I did in my group just the other day, I spoke about Steve Jobs talking about connecting the dots.
The dots.
He famously said that you can't connect the dots looking forward. He said it's only after you've gone and done what you need to do that you can look back, and then you have to connect the dots backwards. So standing there and saying, how do I do this? Although we all want to know how to do things, it's just our natural way, I think. But sometimes it isn't the right question, because if you're having a journey that you've never been on before, of course you're not going to know how to do it. But you're going to know certain things. You're going to know that you need to be more aware. You're going to know that you're going to need to observe things. You're going to know that you're going to need to take responsibility. And you're going to know that you're going to need to take some action. And that action can be anything. You know, I've always taught and followed myself that I like that Taoist concept of Wu Wei, you know, the effortless action, which means that if it's forced action, possibly you're looking at the wrong thing, or you're doing the wrong thing. Yes, we need to take action.
Yeah.
Yes, we need to take steps, but they shouldn't be forced. If we're having to force ourselves to get out of bed in the morning, if we're having to force ourselves to write in a journal, if we're having to force ourselves to record a video for content, or whatever we're doing, then maybe we need to look at our vision again. And I think it's that alignment, that's the word I'm looking for, that has
Absolutely.
to be paramount for people.
Absolutely. And I had an interesting conversation with a client yesterday that fits in here perfectly, where she's been suffering again with autoimmune diseases and asthma and all sorts of other stuff, and gut issues and everything. It's literally been feeling like, for her, like her physical health has just been falling into pieces slowly over the last few years. And she had that frustrating feeling that I'm doing so much right in my life and about my health right now. Why is it not improving quicker? And if you even listen to that statement, I'm doing so much right, why is it not improving quicker? You can feel the force. It's almost tangible.
Yeah, it is.
So is there a possibility of doing those things because you know they are good for you, and you're doing them out of choice of looking after yourself, without putting so much pressure on the outcome immediately? And I know, and I appreciate when people have suffered, and I have suffered a fair bit in my life, both emotionally and physically. When you're in that shitty place of pain, whether emotional or physical, you just want to get the fuck out of it. You want it to be over. The more we allow ourselves, and again, it's practice, it's step by step, to just sink into it and fully feel, we can heal quicker without force. And one of my yoga teachers, and that was funny, during the 6 months in California, one of our favorite yoga teachers that we met there, she was like a sage, honestly. Every time before each lesson, there would be like a 15-minute just a wisdom drop on everybody, and we all be sitting on our mats going, where did that come from? She just looked at all of us and just said, you get to feel to heal. And we looked at each other, and strangers, I looked at Cliff, we looked at everybody in the room like, duh, of course, it's so obvious. But when we feeling the most painful aspects of whether it's a disease or a breakup or whatever it might be, physical or emotional, very uncomfortable. But allowing ourselves to every day feel a little bit more of it allows us to heal quicker, because the fuller we feel, the quicker we heal. And that allows us to drop that pressure and that force. I'm doing this right. I'm doing this right. I'm doing this right. The result should be different. force. And the more we forcing, what you resist persists. We're resisting that change. We're resisting that healing process.
No, I've just written that down because I think that's absolutely incredible. And again, you know, talking about delivering lessons that we do with clients all day, every day, you know, part of one of the foundational things that I like to get across to people is the power of imagination and the power of using images to help us set us on our way. But that's nothing really without emotion or feeling. So visualizing is a great tool. We've seen the research for visualizing, we've seen how important it is, but when you combine it with what I call emotionalizing, when you bring those two together and you feel the end result and you can bring it into that visualizing, you can bring it into that imaginative state, you don't have to force, because you're bringing it to you like an expressway. It's so fast, the healing, the change, whatever it is that you require, it's that feeling, it's that imagining, and it's brought together, and that embodiment of the two things that enable people to, as you say, heal very, very quickly, or create whatever they want to create very, very quickly.
And I'm pretty sure someone would have said it, and I'm just getting like a universal transmission from somewhere, but it's feelings and emotions are the language of the soul, right? Because it is our soul speaking to us. It's no one teaches us at school how to listen to that communication.
Well, we're told not to. You know, I was told all the time at school to stop daydreaming, right? It was almost like it was wrong. It was bad. You know, I had to pay attention to what was going on in the class rather than downloading all this wonderful stuff that was flooding my, you know, rather active imagination. Let's be, you know, perfectly honest. My son, who's 14, has the same kind, well, we all do, but he is especially intuitive to it. He's especially attuned to it. And his school fought hard to knock it out of him. And my ex-wife and I fought hard to keep it in him. And I'm glad to say that he's, you know, still using that imagination today to create incredible magic around it.
I love that.
You know, and I think that we need to look at this. We need to encourage this more. And as adults, dare I say, we need to be more childlike.
Absolutely. And the more fun we have with learning, the more fun we have with embracing anything, be it spirituality for the sake of what we're talking about, mindfulness, or anything. It could be engineering. The more fun we have with it, it doesn't matter how logical or how far away from what we understand as logic we take it, the more fun we have with it, the quicker we embrace it, the quicker we learn, and the easier it becomes. And the
better we are at doing it day after day after day. And
and the curiosity and wonderment, those two energies, those two states of being have taught me so much more about myself and about my life, and have made my life so much easier. And one of my mentors years ago now told me to first become more curious about everything that I experienced, even the emotional, painful situations that I was going through at the time. Be more curious. And listening to Judson Brewer, who wrote the book called The Craving Mind, and his research into the power of meditation and mindfulness and the effect it has on our brain and the levels of suffering in people, it's that curiosity and wonderment that literally allows us to sink into everything a lot more and relax about everything a lot more, and pain ceases to exist. Even if someone is in a panic attack, in the midst of panic attack, if you can ask yourself, at some point there will be like that crack in the door that the light can come through. And you ask yourself in that moment, where do I feel it in the body? Is it in my head, in my chest, top half, bottom half, left or right? You start to explore, and that emotional existential pain ceases to exist, and it moves into the background, and you start to separate yourself from that experience and becoming an observer of it, where you're exploring it, and therefore you know you're not it.
No.
Experiencing it, but you're not it. You are not the panic attack. You are an experienced person that is experiencing a panic attack, but it is separate to you. And that identification with the pain, it doesn't have a place to exist anymore. No. From that curiosity, from that wonderment, it's like being more like a 5-year-old. And for everyone listening, and you obviously have gone through a period where your son was 5 years old, we know what kids are like. But why? But why? That's why. But why this? But why that?
I still do that. I drive people insane. I never stop questioning anything.
And just by being curious and more like a 5-year-old in our life, in any situation, we just allow ourselves to relax so much more. And I think I mentioned that in one of the previous episodes. I used to be an angry motherfucker. So much unprocessed emotion from growing up with an alcoholic dad and my mom that couldn't really talk about emotions because she didn't know how. And all of the shit that, I was experiencing, it was just like, as a teenager in my early 20s, it was just anger. That was the only way of how I knew how to deal with it. But at least I was letting it out.
Yeah.
But the more I started being curious about it, the more I started asking myself those questions. But why are you actually pissed off? Where is it in the body? What's going on? Where are you experiencing it? It just started dissipating. Obviously, it's just one part of my journey and my process and the things I went through and explored to not be as angry anymore. And obviously we do all still get angry, but I'm just pissed off at points. I'm not constantly and continuously angry. But even now, me and Cliff can't really get angry at each other anymore because we just burst out laughing.
I know, it's just ridiculous, isn't it? It really is.
Like you so desperately want to be angry and you just can't.
You can't. No, you just laugh at it. This is when the kids you try and row with me about something and you just end up laughing and rolling around. It's just ridiculous. Yeah. Curiosity is an interesting one. I've got a podcast interview lined up very, very soon with the great Joe Vitale. Wonderful.
Nice.
Yeah, he's a very good teacher. And he coached me about 15 years ago or 16 years ago. And he was really one of the first metaphysical coaches I hired. And back then it was phone calls. It wasn't online.
Amazing.
I know, it's just incredible, isn't it? On the old landline phone, they're just standing in the hallway. And the first lesson one of the first lessons was he told me to be more curious. Yes. He said, be curious about everything. He said, because once you start getting curious about things, you start understanding things in different ways and you start a process of almost elimination where you say that isn't really what it seems to be. You can see reality in a different way. And you're not really seeing reality in a different way. You're processing your thoughts and your emotions about reality in a very different way. And as a result, you see things that are there, but you just don't see. And I've used that so much in my own life for the last 15, 16 years. And it's made a huge difference.
Absolutely. And the quote from Dr. Wayne Dyer comes to mind, and you're probably going to laugh. The way, when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. Yeah. It's just our attitude and our approach that dictates our outcome, not the circumstance. And again, embracing that allows us to just live an easier life. We might be faced with challenges and there might be a shitstorm going on. But when you know that it is your attitude towards that situation that will dictate your outcome, not the circumstance itself, you stop being a victim of your circumstances. You stop believing that life happens to you, and you know that everything happens for a reason. And as corny as it might sound, and some people that are suffering and might be listening to it might believe it's bullshit, but you would have all gone through a situation that would have been challenging in the past, and then you would have turned around and seen the reason as to why it happened.
No, this is true. And I've just picked up my phone, which I never do on these, because I put a quote in one of my groups earlier. And it was from a clinical professor of psychiatry, UCA, Dr. Daniel Siegel. Mm-hmm. And it's talking about the mind. He gives a definition of the mind. And it goes, the human mind is a relational and embodied process that regulates the flow of energy and information. Now, we're talking about changing how you view reality, and what you see changes. And I think that goes a long way to explaining the science behind it. So that every thought creates a chemical response
in the body.
You go through in your daily work. This is how you heal.
Definitely.
And every thought you have has an emotional response, has a chemical response, an indicator in the body. So you are thinking yourself into certain states. You know, the reason that you're so successful in your work is because you go back to the underlying cause. You don't,
Yeah.
you know, put a Band-Aid over the symptom. You say, okay, what's creating the system? Let's deal with that, and the symptom disappears. And this is where holistic medicine is going. This is what healers have known for centuries. This is what metaphysical teachers have known. And this is what science, quantum mechanics, neuroscience is finding out all the time experimentally, that we become what we think of.
And it's funny how it becomes such a novelty through physical hardcore science now, but it's been known to teachers and healers for centuries.
It's unbelievable. And it's the one thing, you know, you go through any kind of philosophical text, any kind of religious text, any type of medical research, it's the one thing that everyone from every area agrees on. We become what we think about.
Yeah,
because that's what we're focused on. That's what we're telling our brain we're interested in. So that's what's showing up for us. It's the old red car syndrome, isn't it? You get interested in a red car, and red cars show up everywhere.
Show up, exactly.
Yeah, Joe Vitale, I mentioned Joe Vitale. You know, he gave me this lesson, but mentioned butterflies. I get butterflies everywhere. It's just ridiculous, unbelievable.
Well, there is, you know, it's all going back to reticular activating system, right? And that part of our brain that just focuses on that specific piece of information that we feed our brain. And, you know, if someone starts to realize by listening to us that they might have been focusing on all the shit that they don't want, and therefore they have more of it in their lives, and they're at the beginning of it and they want to tap into it and see a different result, be it butterflies or red cars or orange cars, literally Pam Grout's E². It's
great
the
book.
Most incredible book.
Great book, yeah. Love that book.
Such a playful way. There is E² and then there is E³ as well.
Yeah.
Oh, so much fun. And when I first started embracing this aspect of my life, just looking at the fact that there could be a different answer and a different result, I went through reading the book and I did all the experiments. And there's one about butterflies, and I was reading the book in December or January. And I was thinking, and we were living in the UK at the time, and I was thinking, where the hell am I going to see butterflies? And we went to Tesco in the evening to pick up food for dinner, and I went through an aisle. I didn't even intend to walk. Obviously, I did, because of my reticular activating system, knowing we must find butterflies. But consciously, I didn't realize that obviously that was going on. But I went through an aisle with cards and wrapping paper, millions of butterflies suddenly on all the cards, all the gift bags, all the paper. And another one, which I have to mention, is just hilarious. Finding cars. One of the simplest, and everyone would have heard about it, right? Think of a red car and everything you see is a red car. Or you buy a new car for yourself that you think is not as popular, and then all you see on the roads is that same car, right? And probably the same color. And I thought when Pam Grout in one of the experiments asks you to physically focus on finding a specific color of the car and seeing as many as you can in the day, I thought, fuck it, bright orange. There's definitely not very many bright orange cars. And we lived in Northamptonshire. Later that day, we had a seminar in Nottingham. Cliff drove to Notts the night before. So I was going in a taxi from our house to the train station, from the train station in Nottingham straight to the venue. So I didn't really even have the opportunity to see many cars that day. And I'm thinking, am I screwing myself over and trying to prove to myself that it doesn't work? We had the event, and again, it was winter. So it was dark really, really early. We left the venue, and I'm thinking, it's pitch black. Yes, we're going to drive back to Northamptonshire, but I'm not going to be able to see the colors of the car because of how dark it is. And in that moment, when I thought that very specific thought, a fuck of bright fluorescent orange Range Rover pulls out from around the corner. In that moment where I thought that I wasn't going to see orange cars.
You just burst out laughing. I bet you burst out laughing.
I did.
Okay, I get it. Right, fair enough.
I got the point. Thank you.
All right, thanks for that. Yeah. Yeah, that's incredible. And it kind of, that synchronicity, it happens all the time if you allow it. Yes. We're our own worst enemies, right?
It's happening. Synchronicities happen all the time. It's not who they happen to, it's who pays attention.
Exactly.
Every single moment of every single day.
And I think that's a great place to sort of leave it today, because we've Wow, I mean, Marta, you again have brought the fire, and
yes,
all some information, and
it always is so much fun. So thank you for having me.
and we shall get together again next month.
Absolutely. Let's make it a regular monthly occurrence.
Yeah, it'll be great. It will
Definitely
be fabulous.
up for that.
Yeah, and judging by the downloads of people watching your podcasts with me and Cliff, there's no reason why we shouldn't. Let me tell you, fabulous stuff. Marta,
so grateful for that.
I'm absolutely thrilled and honoured to have you once again as a guest, and I look forward to the next time in a few weeks. You have a truly magnificent day.
See you later.
See ya.